Consider this your personal one-on-one. Office hours are open and it is time for your session, so get comfortable and let's talk. So we have Augustina today, loves the name by the way, and she wants to know, how do you make your pothos fuller? Because like a lot of us, when we buy pothos at the store, they're beautiful and they're lush, and then we get them home and over time, they start to get a little thin, sparse, maybe even bald at the top, and we want to know how to bring them back to that full state that we originally bought them in. Honestly, a very common problem, so let's talk about it. Now we're going to talk about the why first. So why do pothos start to thin out over time? And there are several factors, and I think a lot of times we're not even realizing that in a pot, there are multiple cuttings of a lot of the plants that we buy. Very much notoriously known with pothos, because if you were to just put one single node of a pothos, it would just create this one long strand. But if you put multiples of those single nodes, well, eventually it's going to grow into a beautiful, lush, full plant. In that pot, as it is growing and as the roots are doing their thing underground, those plants, several of them, though it looks like one big pot, are competing for resources, water, light, nutrients. It could start to, one, stress the plant out. And so again, I think a lot of times we're not realizing there are some factors down below that we may not even be aware of. Another factor also could be lighting. A lot of times with pothos or trailing plants, they grow to be, very long if you're not having them grow upwards on a moss pole or any other kind of support. And as they're growing longer, well, we're looking for places to put them up higher so that their leaves are not on the ground, right? And as we're putting them higher, sometimes we're not thinking about the lighting that they need as they get higher and higher in our home. A lot of times our windows are not floor to ceiling, so the light is coming at them, but not on top of them, if that makes sense. Now, because that light source is not beaming down on top of them, the older leaves, which are at the top near the base of the plant, are going to start shedding through different stressors, be it not enough light, overwatering, underwatering, pests. And those stressors are going to cause leaves to start yellowing and browning and eventually fall off, die off, or we pluck them off. And over time, we're not even realizing it until we look at the plant and say, wow, you're kind of thin. You don't look as full as you used to. And we're not realizing that a lot of those stressors are causing that over time to where we're having a very thin and sparse plant. So let's talk about a solution for our girl Augustina. There are a few, and I want to be very honest with you. Some of them you may not like, but for the betterment of the plant, it is sometimes the healthiest way to go about it. The first one being chopping it up. Now, when I say chopping it up, I mean just cutting it back to where it is most fullest. A lot of times, again, those pothos are getting kind of long and they're getting kind of leggy, but there is a section, there's an area where it looks really, really full. Think about it like haircuts for us as people. When we have really thin, scraggly ends, when we get those haircuts, the hairdresser is cutting it back to where everything looks even, it looks full, so that overall our hair looks healthier. And it's the same thing for biting plants like pothos. When you're cutting it back to just where, again, it starts to get a little bit leggy, that point right in between the fullness and the legginess, that's where you want to cut, because you essentially will, one, encourage the plant to start growing in more fuller. And pothos, they grow very fast, so I would never worry about cutting it back because it will grow back, but it's going to make the plant look healthy overall, rather than focusing on all of the sparse areas, which we tend to do when it starts to thin out. Now, once you chop that, you're going to have a good amount of plant left, and I don't want you to throw it away. You can actually propagate all of what you just cut and root it out in your preferred method, be it water, sphagnum moss, soil, or whatever. And once those cuttings root out, you can then replant them back into the original pot of plants that you cut from. Again, taking the cuttings, rooting them out, taking that plant and just repotting it. You don't have to upsize in the pot. You can just either create little divots to where you can stick the plants in. Sometimes that's a little bit harder. So I would say taking the original plant out, giving it some fresh soil, including those cuttings that you cut and root out, and making it one full plant again. Sometimes it's going to create it to be longer, it's going to get fuller at the top, but that is one way to essentially repurpose the cutting so that it's not a lost cause and help it to continue to grow out and be fuller. That is one solution. Now, if cutting is a little too extreme for you, another solution would be the pin method. And when I say pin, I mean using a bobby pin or something where you can essentially anchor the plant into the pot. Let me explain. When you have a pothos, let's use this for example, the stem and all of the, longness that it creates can essentially be taken, one single stem be taken and wrapped around the top part where the soil is. Because the stem has nodes on it and aerial roots, or places where aerial roots can start to grow out, when you pin it to the soil and that moisture, the soil is touching those nodes, it will encourage the aerial roots to start growing down into the pot. As the aerial roots are growing down into the pot from that stem that you pinned to the top, it will start to create new growth points, and those growth points will also create new leaves. And you're able to make it more full because you're pinning it at the top with the existing leaves that are already on that stem, but because it's going to encourage new growth points, more leaves are going to come out of it too, which over time is going to make it look more fuller, and it can start to grow down and cascade how you probably had it. So the pin method is a less extreme way than just cutting it. I know a lot of people are not fully comfortable with cutting their plants, and I totally get that. But if you pin a few of the single stems around the top part and making sure that those nodes are touching the soil so that the aerial roots can start growing down into it, over time, you'll start seeing a more full and lush plant as well. Now we got to talk about some non-negotiables, because I can give you methods to making the plant more fuller, but if you're not understanding the root cause, you're just going to have the same results again, which is another thin, sparse, bald plant. So non-negotiables are adequate bright lighting. Pothos are notoriously pegged as low light tolerant plants, but they really do love a lot of light. They perform better with a lot of light, and the more light you give them, not direct, but the more light you give them, the more full they are, the bigger the leaves can even get, the more stems and growth points and nodes that can be produced will just make the overall plant look as full as you want it to. So do not skip the lighting part. If you have natural light, I would say an east-facing window, west-facing window. They love that. Even just a really bright room. They don't need to be up near a window if you don't have that capability, but a bright room, they will be perfectly happy. The other thing is consistent watering. Though pothos like to dry out, and they're also notoriously pegged as forgiving plants because they do bounce back, you don't want inconsistencies in their watering. And what I mean by that is you don't want to let them dry out to where they're just drooping and sad, and then you give them water and they perk back up, and then you let them dry out too long again. And the inconsistency is going to cause the leaves to yellow, and eventually those leaves are going to brown and fall off, because once leaves start to yellow, they don't turn back green. And you want to make sure that you understand the watering cadence of your pothos. So of course you want to let them dry out, but you don't want to let them get too dry to the point where they're showing you signs that they are really thirsty. So letting them dry out partially, giving them some water, and letting them be is going to be your best bet. You also don't want to overwater these guys. I think a lot of people may think that pothos need more water than what they actually do, but you can let them be on the drier side than the more wet side. They actually love to dry out a little bit, but again, just not too much. So finding the right balance is going to be very key so that you're not having to deal with leaves that are yellowing and eventually falling off from those stressors. So Augustina, now you know that your pothos is not a lost cause. It just needs a little direction is all. So whether you prop it, chop it, or pin it, be sure to also give it adequate lighting. But let me know if you found this helpful. I want to see you in the comments. Of course, anyone else that's watching and you found yourself in this situation and you think this is helpful, I also want to hear from you too. Office hours are open every Sunday, and I'll see you next week.